So if a young trainee journalist is thinking about a career in television, I mean, you mentioned that you found that a newspaper background was very useful to you. Is there any advice that you can give them? I mean, I suppose starting from they've got an interest, what should they do about that interest and how young should they start thinking about doing something?
Well, I think you can start doing work experience for television companies and for the BBC from 18, but I don't think you have to really commit yourself until you've got a degree under your belt. A degree is not essential, but is fantastically useful.
And should that degree be in a general non-journalistic subject, or do you think a journalism degree is useful?
Well, I think there are two schools of opinion about what kind of degree you should have. I'm the old school. I think a general degree in French or history or politics or something that really interests you and exercises your intellect is the best thing, the best kind of training for journalism of any kind. I think that a media studies degree isn't always the best start. Yes, it suits some people and I think it can be very enjoyable and many of the courses are excellent. But really, I think the best start for a career in journalism is the broadest possible intellectual education. Just come armed with lots of knowledge and lots of experience of different walks of life.
That sounds like a fantastic building block. What do you think about perhaps short postgrad courses? There are some 18 to 36 weeks which essentially aim to give the students the basics across media from print to TV and radio. Is that useful? I mean, when you come on your work experience, is it useful to have work experience people who know one end of a camera from the other, for instance?
Media studies can be a very useful start, but I was always pleased to see somebody coming into television who was just bright and well informed and well educated. And our view was always that if we had somebody like that, we would teach them everything they needed to know about the technicalities of working in television.
Now, there are various accrediting bodies these days, the NCTJ, the Broadcast Journalism Training Council, another one that came out of magazines. Those accreditations, do they matter? Are they important things to have for television?
I think all the qualifications you can get are incredibly useful. It's a very competitive market now, and so if you want to make your CV stand out of the pile of hundreds of CVs that come into the BBC, yes, having an accredited qualification can only be a good thing.
Now, you mentioned work experience as being a very useful additional qualification that you have. If someone is quite keen on multimedia journalism and perhaps thinking of television, should they be, for instance, creating their own films? Should they be running a blog that's got video journalism on it? Is that a good thing to be doing?
I think producers do vary enormously. And so one producer might be fantastically impressed by a blog or evidence of ability in videoing, but others might not. The ones that I know, the people that I speak to, are probably likely to be less impressed by that kind of thing than they are of general intellectual ability and good ideas.
And I suppose it sounds as if it's the character of the individual and their abilities that seems to be more important than what they've got on paper.
I think nowadays having a really strong CV is important because wherever you apply, there's going to be loads of other CVs coming in at the same time as yours. So anything you can do to make your CV stand out obviously helps. On the other hand, I think nowadays a lot of people do start by doing unpaid work experience, and that really gives producers a chance to see what attitude people bring to work, what intelligence they apply to a question, whether they're really capable and eager and full of energy.
That sounds like a brilliant way of showing you practically what you can do. You do hear of people who've been working unpaid for years. Is there a point at which you really are not doing yourself any favours by continuing to work for nothing?
When I started, unpaid work was completely unheard of and would have been considered an absolute outrage. Nowadays you have to be realistic. Lots of employers do offer unpaid work experience, and you can get a fantastic start, foot in the door, by doing it. So definitely take it. On the other hand, I think after a month or two, if there's not some sign of paid work on the horizon, I think it's time to cut your losses and move elsewhere.
Now, much of the media has been hit by the recession, particularly local newspapers, magazines. What are the prospects these days in television? Are things very tight?
I think the recession's hit everybody. Every employer has been offloading staff to a certain extent. That's true. The BBC, which for years has been one of the biggest employers, has taken a policy decision to downsize, and so hundreds of producers have been leaving the corporation, and obviously that makes life very difficult for newcomers to get a foot in the door. But there are always opportunities, and it only takes one break, you know, to get in there. It's one of those things where you just think it seems impossible until that day somebody opens the door for you.
And there really still are adverts that you can apply for like you did and get an interview and get the job?
The BBC has a website, a jobs website. I recommend that everybody looks at it, and in fact, you know, get job alerts sent to your mobile, as I do. I think it's a fantastic service. I think you need to, that's not enough though, you do need to approach people individually. Don't send blanket letters or loads of copy the same thing to loads of different people and loads of emails, they'll just be deleted. Make sure you approach named individuals, that you know who that person is, that you know exactly what sort of person they're looking for, what kind of programs they produce, and write to them, and those sort of letters do still get through.
And so you should really have a knowledge of what you're doing. If you're applying for a particular program, it sounds like it would be pretty tragic if you actually didn't know anything about it.
Absolutely. I mean, know what people look for. In the science department of the BBC, they still do like people to have a science degree. And other people do get into science who haven't got science degrees, but in the first instance, they like scientists. If you haven't got a science degree, maybe you need to look elsewhere or find a good reason why they should be considering you.
So going back to your point about a traditional degree being a useful thing, I imagine then if you'd studied politics or any range of other areas, then you might be able to apply for programs that have a relevance to that area of study.
Yes, if you've got a specialism, obviously that's a very, very good place to start. But whatever you apply for, make sure that you know what you're applying for. Watch the programme. You'd be surprised how many people apply for a programme and haven't got the faintest what it is.